Hello there, my name is Ian and welcome to my YouTube channel. So today we're going to take a look at the latest and unexpectedly released SACD from Analogue Productions, and that is Genesis with their fourth album, Foxtrot, and a very important album in the Genesis catalog because I feel like through some of the interviews and stuff that I've watched while preparing for this review, that Genesis kind of came of age here. This is where they stopped being like a super cult and unknown band and started to find a wider audience. Of course, their audience would only grow over the course of the next 20 years, with many folks, and I think maybe the band would consider this the most important of the early Genesis records, just because it did set the stage for all those future records. This is, of course, mastered directly from the original analog tape to direct stream digital by Chris Bellman at Bernie Grundman Mastering. And this is just the latest of a series of brilliant sounding SACDs from the Analogue Productions label. And I'm talking about Genesis records in particular. They've done Selling England by the Pound. They've done The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, they've done Abacab, and they've done A Trick of the Tail. You can see my reviews for all of those releases with the exception of Selling England by the Pound. I didn't review that one because I hadn't really been doing reviews yet when that one came out, but I've reviewed all the rest of them, so you can check those out on my channel. I'm sure a few of you are wondering what is the difference between this and the many other versions that have come out through the years. Just to show my credentials, I did own a vintage copy of this album on vinyl for years. I don't anymore. I actually got rid of a lot of my vinyl when I started my business, which was a mistake. I wished I'd have kept it, but I do have a number of CD versions. I have this version here, which came in a boxed set with Trespass and Nursery Crime. That's actually behind me, the full set. I think it's being covered by the microphone, the microphone stand. But we'll just call this the cropped cover version. I'm not a big fan of the presentation here or the way that the titles are illegible. But this is a very good sounding copy. I actually loaded in a couple of tracks and A-B'd them all against each other. And I think this version does sound rather good. It's maybe EQ'd a little bit weird. I do detect maybe a little bit of noise reduction usage, but it's not extreme. The next one that I have, and this has been my listening copy for the past year or so, this is the mid-80s Atlantic Records version. And I actually think this version sounds fantastic. And we'll get back to that in just a moment. Yeah, this was my go-to for a long time. I think it turns up great. It's got great dynamics. And you can usually pull it off Discogs for around $20 or less. So if you're trying to get a great sounding version of this album, economically speaking, I would recommend this one here if you can get your hands on it. And then probably the one that maybe most people know, with the exception of the 2007, 2008 versions. This is the definitive edition master. And this came out around 1994. And this was actually the first version of the album I ever heard. And it does sound quite good. Now, I never did buy the 2008 Nick Davis masters, the remixes that he did. And the number one question I get on all of my Analogue Productions SACD reviews is, how does this compare to the 2008 Nick Davis remixes? Well, I'll tell you, the 2008 Nick Davis remixes are not the original mixes. They were new mixes created by Nick Davis and Tony Banks, 2007, 2008. And there was two variants. There was, I think in the United States, we got a CD/DVD variant with a 5.1 mix on the DVD. But in the UK, there's an SACD, which has the 5.1 mix as the SACD or DSD layer. I never bought those because at the time that I was first getting into Genesis, I read very negative reviews about them, and I didn't really have the money either because I was in high school. So I didn't have really disposable income to spend on box sets like that. And even though they were in print back then, they were still kind of expensive, at least compared to the definitive edition masters, which I think I pulled off of Amazon for around like $10 a piece. So these 1994 versions were the versions I grew up with and probably know best. Let's talk about Genesis, Foxtrot. So this is a wonderful album. And I think for many folks, they might even point this to be their best album, if not the best album of the early years. And we open with Watcher of the Skies, which is this tale of an alien visitor on Earth. And probably most iconically, the Tony Banks Mellotron drone, which opens it. And it sets a very dramatic scene where the band starts at a very low dynamic and starts to rise up. And it reminds me a lot of some of the dynamic passages of like 21st Century Schizoid Man by King Crimson. So I feel like this is prog Genesis in full flight. They're perhaps operating with a little bit more confidence than they had on the previous albums. Timetable is maybe a very underrated Tony Banks number. Get 'Em Out by Friday, which introduces the concept of social commentary, which would become a staple for Peter Gabriel's lyric writing for the rest of his career. And here we're talking about a situation where a landlord has decided that he can fit more tenants in his apartments if they genetically modify the human species to be smaller. And so the future is smaller in Get 'Em Out by Friday. It's a wonderful satirical tale, and it's an example of a story song, the kind of thing where Peter Gabriel will inhabit multiple characters within the course of the song, and it goes on a lot of different tangents. They would do this again on the next record with the Battle of Epping Forest, and you could argue that The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway was kind of that on a grand scale across two complete LPs worth of music. And then, of course, Robbery, Assault, and Battery, the track On a Trick of the Tail, picks up on that tradition. And I don't believe they did too much of that afterward. Maybe All in a Mouse's Night from Wind and Wuthering could be classified as like it's a similar kind of song, but it's something that they kind of dropped later on in their career because they would talk about how these songs became too busy, and it was like there was too many great ideas and not enough space. But I think it actually works really well on this track, and there's an even better version on Genesis Live, the live album. So then we have actually my favorite song on the album, which is Can Utility and the Coastliners. And this gets my vote for the most underrated Genesis track of all time. The playing is dynamic and fantastic. We have kind of like a folksy setting. This is King Canute trying to show his power to his kingdom by saying, I can turn back the tides. Well, of course he can't. He's not God. So that sort of like folk tale thing. And you have lovely playing from Steve Hackett especially, and probably Mike Rutherford too. I hear like some acoustic guitar and maybe some 12 strings mixed in. But this has some of Phil Collins' best drum work on, I think maybe in Genesis' entire career. The way he kind of kicks in on that last, I guess, minute and a half of the song is just really exciting. And Mike Rutherford's bass pedals just kind of purr. And it's a very dynamic track. You can kind of hear the seafaring nature of it, and it's very programmatic if you listen closely to the lyrics. So the original album, side 2, opens with Horizons, which is a Steve Hackett. It's sort of a reduction of a Bach cello quartet or a Bach cello piece. As soon as you hear it, you'll recognize the melody. It's very famous. But he's kind of reduced it down to just an acoustic guitar piece, a solo piece. And this is reminiscent to me of some of the solo acoustic tracks that Steve Howe was doing with Yes, songs like The Clap, as well as Mood for a Day. And it's very beautiful. It's classical inspired, and it acts as a sort of prelude to the rest of the album, which is taken up by a 24-minute epic called Supper's Ready. And For those of you who are familiar with the progressive rock genre, the side-length epic would become something of an institution. Like most bands of that era would try it. Even some non-prog bands, I think, would attempt the side-length suite. Now, I don't think even Yes had gotten there yet, but of course Procol Harum did in the late 60s with In Held 'Twas an I, which Tony Banks has cited as a influence on Supper's Ready. So with Supper's Ready, you have this very surrealistic, dreamlike nightmare tapestry of a song that covers a lot of ground, and it's very expansive, and it tells a story. It seems to be about a young couple, two lovers, and the woman is apparently possessed. And the rest of the epic is about the man is sort of like an Adam and Eve sort of thing. The man is trying to cure her possession. And I assume that this is around the same time as like the Exorcist novel. So maybe that was maybe in the back of Peter Gabriel's mind. Of course, the Exorcist film would come out a year later. And I believe that William Friedkin was one of the directors who was approached to direct The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway film. So there's some interesting connections if you like music, if you like the film world at the time, and, you know, connections to prog rock, of course. Tubular Bells is another side-length epic, two side-length epics that was utilized to great effect in the Exorcist film. But beyond that, back to Genesis, this is a song that starts off in a wonderful kind of Fairport Convention mode with the twinkling 12-string guitars, and slowly it just develops into more of an electric sound. And about halfway through, we stop dead, and we go into full surrealism with Willow Farm, which is one of my favorite moments in the entire Genesis catalog, and is the iconic moment for Peter Gabriel when he donned on the flower head, and he would pop up and say, "A flower," and we would have this whole thing play out. So I absolutely love Supper's Ready. This leads into Apocalypse in 9/8, which is my favorite moment of the record. I know I've been saying that a lot lately, but we'll say Can Utility and the Coastliner is my favorite song, but my favorite moment on the record is from Willow Farm through Apocalypse in 9/8, because it's basically an improvisation that Mike Rutherford was kind of messing around with this figure in 9/8 time, and Tony Banks and Phil Collins are jamming with him. And there's a great organ solo that just kind of starts off really lyrical, and it gradually builds into something more aggressive and arguably demonic sounding. When Peter comes in with his lyrics, 666 is no longer alone, it raises the hair on the back of my neck. And I find this generally one of the most effective moments of the album. And we lead into the final section, and with a glorious closing, and bringing back the melody of the Lover's Leap section early on, and kind of tying all these things together. And it's very effective. It's very emotionally arresting. And this is full of so many highlights. The band themselves consider this one of their best records, and I think many of the fans do as well. So this is one that I was really excited to get on the SACD format from Analogue Productions, and I was really excited to hear what Chris Bellman has to do with it. So let's talk about SACDs really quick. I can give you like kind of a rundown of what this technology is. I'm pulling this table that you're seeing off of Wikipedia, but your CD layer has 700 megabytes, while your SACD layer has 4.7 gigabytes. This is nearly 5 times the disk capacity. So an SACD, you can fit nearly 5 times the amount of information as you can a CD. The audio encoding on a CD would be 16-bit pulse code modulation, PCM, versus 1-bit direct streamed digital on the SACD layer. The sampling frequency on the CD layer is 44.1 kilohertz, whereas the sample frequency on the SACD layer is 2,822.4 kilohertz. So we're talking about a much greater frequency range, as well as a greater disk capacity. And also with SACDs, you can have up to 6 discrete surround sound channels. So that would be like 5.1, 5 speakers, and then a sub. And then most interestingly, the playback time for the CD layer is 80 minutes, of course, but the SACD layer offers 110 minutes of playback time. For instance, like The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, they really could have done that as one disc, which would have been interesting. Also, there's some dynamic range differences. So with a CD, your dynamic range is 90 decibels and up to 120 decibels. We're talking about a frequency range of 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, whereas your SACD layer, the dynamic range would be 105 decibels with a frequency range of 20 hertz to 50 kilohertz. Now, there is some debate on this because human hearing goes up to 120 decibels. So we're talking about CDs would be the absolute at the limit of that. Whereas your frequency range goes from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz for younger folks. Whereas middle-aged folks, where maybe I'm kind of heading, 20 hertz to 8 to 15 kilohertz. It's debatable whether we can hear the full frequency range of an SACD, which again goes up to 50 kilohertz, but that depends on a lot of different things, such as what equipment you're using and your age, and maybe some people are more sensitive to this than others. Maybe you can be trained to hear differences. Having doing blind tests on SACDs, I haven't heard an incredible amount of difference. And for me, oftentimes what really makes a world of difference is the mastering. Now, I am playing the DSD, the SACD layer, through my Blu-ray player. I have a 4K Blu-ray player from Sony. It's region free, not that that matters, but it does support playback of the DSD layer. You just have to set it correctly. So I am able to play it back. I am able to hear the DSD layer. So with that technical information out of the way, let's talk about the mastering just a little bit. So in my opinion, comparing this to all the previous versions that I have, the one that perhaps comes closest is that 85 Atlantic Records pressing. Again, the one that I said that you could get for like under $20 if you Discogs it. So I find these very close. Now, there are some differences. For one thing, I think I hear more tape hiss on this version than any other version, but I kind of feel like some noise reduction was used on this, whereas I don't hear any evidence of noise reduction being used on this new master at all. If there was, it's extremely non-invasive. You do hear it during some quieter sections, like at the beginning of Can Utility and the Coastliners, and during some parts of Supper's Ready where there's not a whole lot of going on, when it's more sparse. You do hear it, but what I hear on some of these older versions is kind of evidence of, like when heavy noise reduction has been applied, it sort of sounds like the air has been sucked out of the recording, whereas this feels very full and lifelike. I also notice a dynamic uptick across the board, and it's very subtle, but things like Steve Hackett's leads in Watcher of the Skies really pop out. Like they really jump out at you. And there's other moments like the moment in Willow Farm where Peter Gabriel has inhaled helium and he's doing those higher voices. Those pop right out of the texture and seem more dynamic than I remember them being. One moment in particular that I think shines dynamically thanks to the new mastering is the final section of Supper's Ready, entitled As Sure as Eggs Is Aching Man's Feet, a difficult title to recite and remember. But the opening of it, when we have the tubular bells, presumably played by Phil Collins, that really stuck with me. Like the tubular bells sounded so lifelike and full and loud, and I feel like that loudness carries through that final section, which on previous versions of this master have often felt a bit lacking to me. But I think with the extra little bit of dynamics that you get, potentially with the SACD format itself, that final movement is more powerful than ever to me. And it could be because I'm used to like hearing it back in the vinyl days when you'd be running into the center of the record and things would start to get distorted or compressed together. but it's just never sounded as glorious to me as it does on this new master. Overall, both versions of this album that I'm talking about here, to me, have a very soft quality to them, very analog quality to them. But I do feel like in this new SACD, the dynamics particularly shine. And I'm talking about moments like in Watcher of the Skies, where they get really quiet and start to build up. It feels much more exciting on the new SACD version than on the previous. Now, again, this is not a bad version at all to have. And I think for most people, the older version is going to be okay. But if you want it just to be a little bit better, a little bit more dynamic, a little bit fuller sounding, maybe, I think you will not be dissatisfied with this SACD. So yeah, let me know what you think. Are you planning on picking this up? What do you think about the Foxtrot album in general? Is it one of your favorites like it is one of mine? Let me know in the comments below. As for me, I'm off to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I am going to be attending and working the Prog Day Festival. It's 2 days, 8 bands, celebrating modern progressive music as well as the history of the genre, although we don't have a lot of historical acts this year, though we've had them in the past. But my job will be to manage the stage, which means that I'm in charge of keeping the festival on time, as well as making sure that all of the bands have everything they need to have a successful performance. So I got to get moving. But it's great to be back, and I have lots of cool stuff planned in the near future. I think that the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway box set is finally coming. I saw Classic Album Review, Barry Robinson, I saw that he posted it. So I was like, wow, it exists. It's finally coming. So at the end of the month, I do plan to review that. So if you want to keep up with my review of that upcoming box set, as well as any future Analogue Productions Genesis catalog releases, I do plan to get Nursery Crime, for instance. So if you want to see my reviews of those, please do subscribe to the channel. Another way to encourage good fortune in the algorithms is to like the video, because it shows that people are interested and they care. But I will see you next week, and I will have lots of stuff planned in September. But until then, catch you later. Bye-bye.